So we're going to get started in just 1 minute. So if you're looking for a seat, and if you could shut the doors back there, that'd be great, so we don't have the outside noise. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. That good? Clear? All right, good. So I've got 10:44, so we're gonna get started. So grab a seat. Really appreciate everybody taking some time here. It's nice to see a full room for this topic as we really get into TechNet Augusta 2025. So my name is Dave Forbes. I lead the cyber physical defense practice at Booz Allen Hamilton. And what that means is I cover everything for Booz Allen in the OT, weapons systems, and space mission systems cybersecurity realm. Okay, so that's the intro that gives you a sense of what my perspective is here. And in that role, I focus predominantly on the types of solutions that we can bring to OT networks to best secure OT networks to meet that particular mission. And along the way, we'll talk specifically about the importance and the uniqueness of the mission, the location, the assets, and of OT networks. For this particular presentation, we're focusing on how we modernize OT cybersecurity through the use of zero trust. Okay, so I'm really thrilled to have a chance to come back again and give a presentation here at TechNet Augusta. And what I like most about this opportunity is that it's a training. This part of the conference is a training event. So my focus here is to provide something that is useful, practical, actionable, kind of gives you a sense of how to smartly use different zero trust for OT technologies, helps you think about modernizing the way that we secure critical infrastructure, and also emphasize collaboration. Okay, so we're going to leave some time at the end for questions. I want questions. Maybe halfway through this, I'll ask if anyone have any questions along the way. But I really want this to be useful for you, right? This is intended to be a practical look at zero trust and zero trust for OT and how we can take it out in the field to better support operators to secure their OT networks. So with that in mind, some of the themes that two of the themes that I just really want to drive home here. Number one, cybersecurity is national security, okay? And number two, cybersecurity is a team sport. So really want this to be about collaboration. When the presentation is complete, that kind of continues the dialogue. So happy to connect, happy to follow up, but really at the end of the day, this is about examining zero trust for OT, understanding better what it is, and ultimately comparing notes on what it means as we evolve to this part of cybersecurity. So just to get a frame of reference on the group that we have here in the room today, so how many of you are employing zero trust in the field right now? Okay, great. How many of you are developing or fielding technologies that can be used on OT networks to do zero trust? Okay, great. How many of you are asset owners who are worried about how to best secure against the next threat? How many of you are just here to learn what zero trust is and get some fundamental training as you begin your journey in cybersecurity? Okay, so we have a mix. I challenge the folks who are particularly experienced in here to come up with some questions at the end to make all of us smarter. And then those of you who are starting out in this journey, let's continue the conversation. So, I think that we want to start by talking about the threat landscape. It seems like everything that we do in cybersecurity, we lead with, talking about the threat landscape. But in this particular case, there are some things that I want to drive home that we make sure that we understand, and particularly apply to the uniqueness of OT. A little bit further down the briefing here, we'll take a knee for a minute and kind of revisit, the uniqueness of operational technology. What is it, OT versus IT? It's always good to do a little bit of a review from that perspective. But when we think about the threat landscape that we're dealing with here, we really need to look at it as one connected battle space, okay? I mean, frankly, I hope that you find this information valuable. There are some things along the way that I think are particularly important, and this is one of them. One connected battle space means that our adversaries, they don't look at the United States infrastructure as a Department of Defense. They don't look at a defense industrial base. They don't look at a supply chain maritime system, electric sector, business, Department of Commerce. They just see one connected battle space with a number of seams. So it's really important that we step back and fundamentally look at the threats and realize that, we live in our stovepipes here as we look at, particularly DoD critical infrastructure, but that's not how the adversary looks at us. The adversary recognizes that we're going to take the path of least resistance to make it hard or impossible for you to do your mission. Maybe that is shutting down a power plant. Maybe that is making you think that your water supply is poisoned. Maybe it is stopping or redirecting a railhead, okay? Maybe it is shutting down the power grid. Some of these things are more or less sophisticated, but at the end of the day, it's one connected battle space. When we talk about OT networks today, we're generally talking about some sort of installation or infrastructure. And I really want to drive home what's different today than maybe even when we spoke last year or 10 years ago. But those of us, and particularly you in uniform, and those of us who are supporting the DoD, which I think is many of us, we're working and supporting assets on installations that have the power plants, the barracks, the medical facilities, but they also have the weapon systems and platforms, the C4ISR, the maintenance, the airfield lighting systems, right? And all those things need to be viewed as connected. And the more we focus on smart technologies, the more we transition to AI, the more we recognize that avenues towards degrading our mission effectiveness on an installation are all completely connected. My particular experience that I want to share is really going out and seeing this and doing this at Air Force and Space Force installations across the world. And if you don't look at it from this lens, we might take this for granted. But if you're just thinking about how can I best secure this power plant, or we got to worry about the HVAC system at this particular barracks, we're going to miss it. Okay? But from a macro perspective, we need to recognize that when the modernized infrastructure that we're building and updating to prepare for current and future threats has these key weapon systems and platforms on these installations with the other infrastructure, and they're all a series of threat vectors. So what does that also mean about zero trust? Okay? It means that zero trust isn't just a buzzword or a natural evolution of technology, but it's a natural evolution of technology and capability that is needed to meet this threat of our time. So, one connected battle space. Let's look at the threat in a little bit more detail. Okay, you can look at the chart here. But tactical threats, strategic threats, disruptive, accelerating technologies, making it difficult for us to keep pace with what the adversary is trying to do, and unconventional threats. Tactical, GPS spoofing, maintenance and tool degradation, spoofing of parts in the supply chain, up to more strategic threat capabilities like C4ISR disruption, identity compromise, supply chain access. It's important to understand that when we look at the threats in cyber and electronic warfare, that they're going to continuously be changing. And they're going to be at different levels of sophistication. And we see this as we look at different use cases, whether it's Volt Typhoon or Salt Typhoon by the PRC, or the more brute force tactics that are taken by the Russians in some cases in Ukraine. Okay, but the takeaway here is this threat chart, these threat discussions that we have every single time that we get together, they're constantly evolving. So I want to make it clear that, you know, the more I see what's happening on installations, and it's best harnessing the technical capabilities that are out there now to meet that threat. Okay, you're going to hear me talk a lot about the practical application of zero trust activities and zero trust capabilities on OT networks. Okay, and a lot of this is because it's natural. The threat is forcing us to change the way we think. The threat is forcing us to best use the technical capabilities that we have. And we need to do that in a common sense way. So I'm not here to talk about a specific product or solution. I'm here to talk about the need to best identify products and solutions that we can take to the field and that we can use to mitigate the threats. And in this particular case, you know, taking full advantage of the zero trust framework for OT networks. So what is zero trust? Okay, I kind of put a couple notes that, you know, if we're taking the test and the pop quiz, some of the things that I want to drive home here. Assume breach. Many of you have heard this over and over again over the last few years, but zero trust for OT, we're in an assume breach environment. We're being attacked, okay? So we need to think beyond compliance. This isn't about assessment. You need to do assessment. We need to continue to look at what's happening on our networks. You need to have accurate asset inventory. But we're operating in an environment where the attack is happening. You need to assume that the bad guys are on our network. Zero trust means no trust. Only approved access to people who are authorized, okay? Limited access, no trust, okay? And what that means is, and I'll hit this again, it's protecting inside and outside the fence line. So you remember the chart I just showed about the installation? What's unique and beneficial about zero trust is that now you're protecting networks within networks. And you're doing this across IT and OT, okay? You're gonna hear me talk a lot about IT and OT, particularly when we get into the back half of the presentation and talk specifically about OT. Okay, assume breach, no trust, trust but verify, networks within networks, and across IT and OT. So, you know, why are we doing this now? Well, the threat is forcing us to do it. I really, it's interesting because when we have these discussions, I try to be very careful not to say the same stuff, right? That many of you have heard over and over again. But why now? There are some key notes that we need to look at here. And I'll get to some of the specific bullets on the slide, okay? But beyond compliance, okay? If you're focused on establishing a cybersecurity program and an OT cybersecurity program, it is just not enough to do the risk management framework. It's not enough just to have an accurate inventory, but rather you need to proactively look at what is currently penetrating your networks, where those threat vectors, what the advanced persistent threats look like on your installation, and what kind of solutions you have in place to mitigate those threats. There have been case study after case study that we're seeing where the PRC in particular has made a transition from, there was a time when we were worried about them sitting on our networks and stealing IP. Okay, now through the activities around Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon, we have seen that the threat actors are sitting on our network and they're thinking about how they can actually disrupt, how they can actually make plans to degrade our mission. So they've gone from just kind of watching and stealing information to actually positioning to degrade our ability to have our system support our missions and degrade our ability to actually defend our critical infrastructure. So these are the practical threat things that lend itself towards why we're moving towards zero trust right now. Fortunately for us as cyber defenders and asset owners, the government's picking up on this, right? So we'll hit some of the mandates that are taking place now, but the DoD in particular has moved forward with zero trust for IT mandates and zero trust for OT mandates. So whether it is in the executive guidance or in the National Defense Authorization Act, or in the guidance that's coming out from the DoD Zero Trust Portfolio Management Office in the DoD CIO, the DoD and the federal government and CISA are moving forward with strategic guidelines saying that, as a federal and civilian force, we're moving forward with the implementation of zero trust for IT and zero trust for OT implementation for the force. Okay, so not only do we have to do this based on the threat landscape, but the executive branch on down has made decisions for us to mandate and take action to move forward with this. I want to see if I've got, so going back a chart, you can see in particular some of the milestones that we have hit and are moving forward with. Federal civilian agencies had to meet specific goals by September 2024. By September of 2025, the IC community is being asked to achieve basic zero trust. And by September of 2027, DoD organizations need to hit target level zero trust activities. We're going to talk about this. There are 152 zero trust activities. I have a chart on this. 91 of them are considered target level. By September of 2027, DoD agencies need to hit those target level activities. We'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by target level activities. So I kind of talked about this. This is just pretty much a better chart. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about mandates, but it's important to know that, when you go back out to your agencies, whether you're in industry and trying to talk about the application of your technology, or you are a government asset owner trying to get resources and dollars, it's always nice to revert back to this and say, hey, guess what? The NDAA, the executive branch, the DoD, they're telling us that we need to do this. So if you're charging me on my installation for protecting these assets, I need some money and resources to be able to do that. And not only is there a threat, but here's why. So we have different organizations across the federal government, okay? You have the DoD, you have the intelligence community, and you have CISA. This is pretty fundamental here, but there are 3 zero trust models, 3 zero trust frameworks. The DoD zero trust model you can see here on the chart. This is publicly available. I would encourage you to read and research these things. It has 7 pillars. We'll kind of dive into that a little bit. Functionally, it's important to understand that when you crosswalk the DoD zero trust model with the CISA zero trust model, there's a lot of similarities there in the types of activities and types of functions. The intelligence community zero trust model is not publicly available. It's a similar pillar construct. And CISA has a publicly available zero trust model with 5 pillars. And we'll show a detailed look at that. So it's important to know what these are, because you'll find, like I have, that in some of the zero trust for OT environments that we're in, you're not quite sure what model applies. Okay, so there's a particular use case that I like to cite. Let's talk about maritime. And I think sharing experience this year is important. And when we have the opportunity to ask questions, I encourage you all to do the same thing as well. But doing some work with a maritime use case right now. And when you look at maritime cybersecurity and maritime infrastructure, CONUS and OCONUS, it can be complicated. Lots of organizations, lots of stovepipes, lots of stakeholders. You're not always sure what zero trust framework to use. So in our particular case, We worked on a thought piece with a partner that's publicly available, and we're doing it based on the CISA Zero Trust for OT model. Okay, so even at the lower level, more tactical asset owner environment, it's important to have an understanding of how we're organized in terms of models and frameworks. This is literally a bird's eye view of the DoD Zero Trust model, but this is publicly available, okay? And I want to kind of, those of you who are taking notes, who are going to go back and do some things functionally or start in a new position, there are some key things that you should know. So the DoD's framework is 7 pillars. Under these pillars, there are 45 capabilities. Practically speaking, you look at the pillars, and those pillars are focused on capabilities around the user, devices, applications and workload, data, network environment, automation and orchestration, and visibility and analytics. And under each of these 7 pillars, there's a set of 45 capabilities. Don't make this more complicated than it is. 45 capabilities that the department has determined are needed to be able to implement Zero Trust on, in this case, IT networks. Okay? To the right here, you see the infamous fan chart. Who has heard of the fan chart before this presentation? Okay, just a few of you. You need to know what the fan chart is. Okay, and those of you who I see who've been doing this a while, who I know, I just really want most of the people to walk out of here with this important fundamental knowledge of Zero Trust and Zero Trust for OT. But that fan chart right there contains 152 Zero Trust activities. Okay? It's not any more complicated than that. 152 things that you do that we've determined contribute to Zero Trust on your network. There is not one solution or product, we'll get to this, that does most or all of those 152 activities. Okay? But what it is, it's a little bit of a scorecard. So if you're being asked to think about, hey, do Zero Trust on your network. Okay, where do I start? Well, these are the things I should be doing. Where's my piece and where do I begin and how do I gauge progress? 152 activities, so we'll get back to that. Here's a look at CISA's model. Okay? CISA's model has 5 pillars based on 3 functional areas underneath those pillars. Their pillars are identity, devices, networks, applications and workload, and data. Okay? And they break them out in terms of visibility of analytics, automation, orchestration, and governance. Okay? This isn't a showstopper for your organization, but we want you to have kind of a level set of how the government organizations are looking at their frameworks. Now, CISA's in particular is one of the many roadmaps that you can choose to guide your Zero Trust journey. But this here, having read some of the things that went into this thinking and spent some time with the CISA leaders who are developing this, they're really focused on, particularly with this very dense diagram on the right, with those specific functional capabilities and things that they need to do Zero Trust for OT across what? What is CISA focused on? 16 critical infrastructure sectors. Okay? So some of the things, right? You've got different frameworks. You have the fan chart, 152 activities. DoD is focused on missions and installations and infrastructure. CISA is focused on 16 critical infrastructure sectors. Any thoughts or questions? I get to ask questions along the way or ask for questions. Any comments on that or any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Private enterprise should probably be focusing on the system model.
Great question. So I'll go back to the U case. It's a half of a yes. In the absence of a framework, yeah, I'd go to CISA. Okay, but obviously, if you're supporting a DoD installation, we do DoD. Okay, so Mr. Resnick from the DoD PFMO designed the DoD Zero Trust framework for us to use for DoD. But, when I'm thinking about a use case with Port of Houston, right, I'm using CISA. When I'm thinking about the rest of those critical infrastructures sectors, I'm using CISA until told otherwise. Okay? Okay. So the benefits of Zero Trust. Fundamental. Stronger protection. One of the things that, I want to highlight when we'll deep dive to this in a couple of minutes. But truly, when, OT couldn't be a better use case for Zero Trust, okay? At the end of the day, if you're implementing Zero Trust on your OT network, it really allows you to identify alerts faster, more completely, and when you can do those two things, you can respond faster. Okay, I got a chart that talks a little bit more to that. More stable cyber investments and accelerated mission outcomes. Okay, let me foot stomp another theme. Your Zero Trust journey is easier to start than you think it is. Okay, so we'll get to that as we talk about some of the myths around Zero Trust. Okay, 3 main areas of Zero Trust benefits. It's important to understand that you can see the list here of, where does this span across? Data, networks, tactical, you can look at this list. But one of the things I want to underscore here is Zero Trust for IT, Zero Trust for OT, Zero Trust for weapon systems, Zero Trust for weapon systems OT. So particularly when we get more into the OT part of this, we can't forget about the weapon systems and platforms. We're on a journey right now, okay? We've been doing Zero Trust for IT for a few years now, making great progress as a department. I think that we're walking into the water around Zero Trust for OT. That's why we're here. And we're really trying to figure out Zero Trust for weapon systems and Zero Trust for space. Welcome the thoughts here on this. Had the opportunity to sit down and have some strategic discussions with the DoD Zero Trust for weapon systems team about lessons learned that we have seen in OT, Zero Trust for OT. What's different? What's the same around Zero Trust for weapon systems? So I just encourage you, when you walk out of here, you think of Zero Trust for IT, Zero Trust for OT, Zero Trust for weapon systems. The application of this framework eventually applies to where we are in terrestrial infrastructure up into the space domain, ultimately over time. Here are some specific examples when we talk about stronger protection, okay? Protect critical assets, different value across the domains, defending IT and OT networks at speed and at scale. This is one of the things that I want to highlight to you. When you are looking at implementing Zero Trust for IT or Zero Trust for OT, generally the technologies that we're using are mature enough so that you can do alert detection faster. At the end of this deck, I got some specific lessons learned to share. But the microsegmentation, asset visibility, remote access capabilities that we have, particularly resident in our continuous monitoring and our OT-SDN technologies, they allow for moving at speed unlike we were able to do before. So, fundamentally, Zero Trust and for IT and OT is a more complete and advanced way to deploy the technologies that we have now. So let's talk a little bit about, kind of going back to what Zero Trust is and what Zero Trust isn't. We look at Zero Trust myths. Okay, again, some fundamental information here. You can't go out and buy Zero Trust. I look out in the crowd here and I'm seeing a handful of folks that I work very closely with who have awesome OT and IT monitoring technologies. That's great. But you just don't go and buy Zero Trust. What Zero Trust is, it is a framework. Zero Trust is a strategy to secure your network. No single vendor delivers end-to-end zero trust. Okay? Again, a little bit of storytelling here, but in a given 90-day period, I'm not selling or building particular zero trust products, but rather we get the opportunity to partner and work with zero trust technologies. And on 3 different occasions had the opportunity to work with and build an architecture with 3 different combinations of technologies that do continuous monitoring, that do network cloaking, that do OT-SDN. You identify your specific architecture, you figure out what technologies best apply, and how they work together, okay? So there isn't one solution on the shelf that allows you to meet even a majority of the zero trust activities. Legacy systems doesn't block your ability to do zero trust. So here's a personal thing, okay? There are 3 things that you should be doing on your network, okay? Number 1, you need to have asset visibility, okay? You can't secure what you can't see. Number 2, you need to be deploying advanced security controls, okay? That is zero trust. Number 3, you need to take the necessary steps at times to modernize your network. Okay, so that means in some cases, legacy systems no longer meet the mission effectiveness of your network and you need to replace them. But make no mistake about it, when we talk about zero trust implementation, that isn't just in a future environment. It's just not the base of the future. Okay, we're doing zero trust for IT and zero trust for OT right now at installations that have new systems and old systems. One of the other myths that I want to highlight here is it's not a cold start. How many of you are doing cybersecurity on your networks right now? Okay, you're already hitting some of these zero trust activities. Okay, so it's important to understand that you need to take advantage of the work that you're doing now, and you already started that journey. 3 different use cases we examined to begin New Start Zero Trust and 2 New Start Zero Trust for OT projects. And in each case, we found that there were a certain number of zero trust activities that were already being accomplished with the existing IT and OT cybersecurity program. So make sure that you understand that you're probably partway through that journey with a cybersecurity program that you already have. Okay? So zero trust is a framework. It's a strategy. It's not something that comes in a box. The best zero trust is an integration of tools. And in many cases, there's a technical and there's a policy aspect to this. So just want to make sure everyone understands that. So let's talk specifically about zero trust for OT. Okay. So IT is about data. OT is about systems and processes. We all understand that, right? Okay. IT can be patched. OT is all about uptime. I'm biased, but it's much easier to go in and update or upgrade an IT system on a continuous basis than it is to take a power plant offline and upgrade your OT system. When we look at OT systems and infrastructure, it runs across a whole range of different types of environments. Some of them are here. Power, gas, water manufacturing, DoD, weapon systems, platforms, maintenance, electric grid, space, satellites, all have OT. Okay, so just kind of a quick refresher on OT versus IT when we make that change. Want to make sure everyone is clear on that. Questions? Okay, so we're moving over into the OT environment here. Okay, the other piece of this that makes it hard, and you can see some of the stuff I touched on, IT lifecycle based on that patching and update is 3 to 5 years. Lifecycle for OT in many cases is 30 to 50 years. How many of you have OT on your installations or infrastructure that is older than 25 years? Okay. How many of you have OT on your infrastructure that doesn't meet the mission requirements of your installation? Okay. So just kind of revisiting that primer on the difference between IT and OT. So when we are doing zero trust for OT, it's just important to keep in mind for our teams, but for also the people that we support, that it's different. Okay? You're using technologies that sometimes are different themselves, or you're using those technologies in a different way. From a very practical perspective, when you go on to an installation, we're doing a zero trust for OT pilot right now. Access to IT systems on a base are entirely different from access to OT systems on a base. Call up your civil engineers and tell them that you want to go in and just have a couple days with their power plant to test out some new stuff. They're probably not going to be really happy about that, right? Am I right? Right? So it's a different environment that we all need to be aware of. Okay. So let's kind of get into a little bit more of the meat here around what we call demystifying zero trust for OT. And I'm probably going to walk around here a little bit on this one. Everything we do in my role, okay, is based upon, it's still based upon, in OT, the Purdue model reference architecture. Who's heard of the Purdue model before this discussion? Okay. As we advance technologically, I have folks on my team who like to tell me that the Purdue model architecture is getting outdated. Okay, fine, it's getting outdated, and it is. All right, I have a machine-to-machine partner doing machine-to-machine identity on OT networks, and increasingly, as we increase the attack surface and our visibility, the Purdue model doesn't apply as much. But you know what? As we get down the road and begin this journey around zero trust for OT, we think it does. So for those of you who are seeing this for the first time, level 5 of your Purdue model, you desktop computers. It's your internet. It's your office. Okay? Down to level 0, that's your pumps and motors and sensors, those things you don't see, those things only a few people know about, those things are probably very dusty and have cobwebs. And if they break, it only takes like 2 people on the basis to pump. Okay? We think that the funnel of opportunity for zero trust for OT, this is kind of proven in some testing that we've done in our labs, and we've now with some of our partners, is really level 3.5 to level 2. Your SCADA, your remote DMZ, your facility operations. So when you want to do zero trust for OT practically, right? You don't want to do any harm. You want to be able to move quickly. You want to be able to leverage existing technologies, and you want to be able to get buy-in from those asset owners. This is a good start spot. Now, there are technologies that are applicable across the Purdue model, but we are seeing that we get down the road, starting with zero trust and OT networks, level 2 to 3.5 is the heart, is the place to start where you can make the most impact with the lowest risk. Questions, thoughts? I see any thoughts over here?
It's just the convergence of OT and IT. They're both using TCP IP infrastructure. You have to be careful of trying to find something that's no different than the OT.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great point. So there's a balance between leveraging what you're already doing and finding something different. One of the ways that I've seen this tackled is you can be using a continuous monitoring capability on your network that affords you asset visibility or network visibility that isn't enough to do the type of network security that you need for zero trust. So again, we think this is a stepping off point, this model. One of the things that we found in the field, one of the things that we found in the field, like thoughts here, is that there is reluctance. There's a difference between what's being said at headquarters, what's coming out in policy, and what the civil engineers on the ground want to do. Okay? So we are trying to find a practical way to get into the spaces, to get onto the installations, to begin to test, deploy, and implement zero trust for OT. So, you know, we think that that is a good stepping off point for that perspective.
By focusing there, are you assuming that the management system for OT that resides at the level 4, level 5 level is already covered by Zero Trust?
No.
So why wouldn't you focus on those systems as well for Zero Trust? Because if you get into those building management systems, you've essentially got the keys to the kingdom
Okay.
to control everything else.
To your point, there is a fair assumption that they're covered by Zero Trust for IT. Yes. So it's an assumption that we're more focused on OT here than we are here. Could be wrong, but if you're doing, let's just look at the Thunderdome methodology that I happen to be very familiar with. The Thunderdome methodology, Thunderdome contract with DoD Zero Trust, they're up here. It's doing Zero Trust here. Okay? It's not doing it here. It's not doing it here. So that's why we're focused here. Okay? Not limited to that, but that's where we think we begin.
Thank you.
Sir, so foundationally for Zero Trust, we spend a lot of effort on identity, credential access management, data centricity aspect that brings on. Is there anyone relooking the OT aspect of creating some sort of credential warehouse for devices in Zero architecture?
They're working on that with the portfolio management office. Yes, I've heard some. So we're talking to a couple of technologies that focus on identity, right? Just gave a presentation an hour ago with a company called Corsia. Okay, they focus on identity management for OT. We know that the portfolio management office is focused on exactly what you said. How do we kind of take OT, ZT for OT to next level to focus on identity and what credentialing needs to be updated or changed? Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. Always include this chart. I included it last year. Last year I gave kind of an OT 101. Governance. There's governance out there, okay? We like the CISA Cybersecurity Performance Goals, the NIST CPGs. I think that, you know, anytime you're embarking on OT cybersecurity, and even if it's with Zero Trust for OT, a framework to fall back on are the guidelines that are available to you by NIST and CISA that kind of allow you to make sure you're hitting some of the fundamental standards. So we always like to include the fact that don't forget that stuff out there. So don't ever start with a white piece of paper. So the next two charts kind of dive a little bit further into the Zero Trust activities. I'm attributing the next two charts to Mr. Dale Hagley, who is the Technical Director of the Air Force Cyber Resilience for Control Systems, CROCS, at the Department of the Air Force. He recently gave these two charts in a presentation, so I asked him if I could use them, and they're exactly as he presents them. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is the Zero Trust for IT fan chart. There's 152 activities, 91 target activities, 61 advanced activities for 152. Target activities are exactly what it sounds like. Okay? So target activities are the activities that need to be hit by the milestone 2027. They're the fundamental kind of low-hanging fruit Zero Trust activities. With maturity, we focused on the advanced Zero Trust activities. I'm sorry, this is for IT. Okay? You can see one of Daryl's quotes. Any questions on that? So this is the IT fan chart. Okay. This is the OT fan chart. Of those 152 Zero Trust activities, we collectively, the community, and what I want to make sure you all understand, you have a voice. Many of us in this room were involved with working with OSD to determine which of these 152 activities apply to OT. 92 of them. Okay, so this is the OT, this is the draft, OT Zero Trust fan chart, 92 of them. 61 target activities, 31 advanced for 92. Okay, now what's important to understand is that when you develop your Zero Trust for OT architecture, it's just not like something where you're going to hit all of these activities. But and I want to hear from anyone who's been doing this, but we've been working very closely with other members of DoD, and it's like, okay, this is how I handle this, I want to hear how you handle it. Technology vendors come to me all the time, want to demo their capability. Okay, first of all, let's get past the PowerPoint. I don't want to see individual administration, I want to see architecture. I want to see a Zero Trust for OT architecture and how vendor technologies work together and how many of these activities we do. Not expecting to see us hit all 92 on solution. Okay, so again, 92 for OT. Target for September 2027 for initial Zero Trust for OT activities. Questions? Yes, sir.
In my ignorance, while I ask this question, it's the same chart from the other thing, right?
Yes.
It's just different portions plucked out from OT.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Then why would you need to separate OT versus IT? Why not just label them as like NPEs versus PTs and treat them as such instead of segregating the two systems? And I think we covered it already. Sorry.
I didn't. No, I didn't cover it. Why would you separate them?
And the reason why I ask is because, like, when I think of ZT, I'm like, yo, all of it is all part of the infrastructure. If you're PE, a person, you're a non-person, the devices within, has access to data with, and you kind of working through that. And my air conditioning cooler, chiller is just as critical as my computer that's on the desk. It's still accessing some kind of data. My SIEM is still doing the thing like visibility, and all of those are still happening. So why separate OT and IT?
So I'm gonna give you my what I think is a common sense answer. Implementing Zero Trust on OT networks and IT networks, they're owned by different people. They're going to be in many cases different technologies. Success looks differently. Access to those systems is different. The IT and OT asset owners across the government don't necessarily work together. And I think culturally, both of us here culturally, going back to the national cyber strategy before, we've done our very best to segregate and say, hey, we got our time out, guys. We have to understand that OT is different than IT, and this has natural problems. Personally, I think that if we didn't break it out, we'd have a harder time getting towards the actual evolution of Zero Trust for OT pilots and testing solutions on OT network unless we're able to specifically focus on those 92 activities. Having seen this journey, I think this is kind of an easier way to look at it.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'd love to just kind of pick your thoughts on it because I think you brought up, infrastructure before, I think, 21, and in 21 it kind of shows the longevity with one versus the other when you think about patching and how long the system is. So I get that. I just wanted to kind of understand kind of your thoughts because even as you explain it, I think culturally that's how we're used to seeing things, and in that cultural space, it's like while you can have that segregation, you can also not have it and lump them all together and then see a single solution to view. Now your OT guys are looking at the same system that
Yep.
your IT guys are kind of at the top level.
I see where you're going. I see where you're going with it, and I want to go there. I think that we need to go back to slide number 1. This is what Corb's saying. Slide number 1 is one network.
Yeah.
One network, IT and OT. Here's your architecture. You can look at it on a screen, and it's IT doesn't make a difference. I'm with you 100%. Having
culture.
Having watched this unfold, I think it's been needed. I want to see who agrees with me or disagrees, but this has been a way to get the OT community to embrace zero trust for OT. And I will tell you, a part of this discussion here is to continue to communicate. I'll tell you this, do a pilot, test your zero trust for OT solution in a safe place. If it works, scale it. Okay? We're doing a zero trust for OT pilot in a lab. Great, doing it in a lab. Asset owners, tell me, I'm not an asset owner. Tell me if I'm wrong. There's a caution, right? So we're having to move fast and move slow at the same time. So I think that this is part of that change. Yes, sir.
I think one of the things is the resources at the edge versus the resources back at 19, right? So these problems are kind of addressed differently. So you might have less costly, more affordable stuff at the edge, like the microcontroller or chip, sensors, that kind of thing, right? So that's applied differently from like an embedded system engineering perspective than you would on a network that you normally would have, products and solutions that provide these things. I think that's one of the differences and why you have two different domains.
Could we make the same argument for the air domain, the sea domain, the tactical domain, land domain?
Yes, yeah. So a lot of these systems, the weapon systems that we deal with require, right, they're usually more akin to control systems. And control systems are much different than you would have, you're targeting, you're shooting, or you're moving, you're flying, like you're doing all these things. But control systems are much different than your normal IT system. Right? So that's really
Great. Good point. Good conversation. Continue. I want to hear some point. Particularly the guys in uniform. Understand that. Where's this grounded? The road testing, right? Yeah. Only been 2 zero trust for OT pilots done. I'm sorry. One's been completed. We're doing the second. Okay. So there needs to be more. Number 2, in developing the framework for that pilot, we recognize that the work that was being done downrange at DoD was already hitting zero trust OT activities, right? How do we harness that and use it to get things in the field faster? Great points. Okay.
I just wanted to ask, like, when you're looking at creating kind of a system for zero trust for OT, what do you think is the most important thing to look at? Like, you mentioned that, the DoD has an idea of how it should be done.
Yep.
And there's the engineers that are on the ground, they have different ideas. What are your ideas?
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
Great. Next 3 slides will hit that. Okay. Sort of keys to success in TTPs. To start with your answer, again, my view, you got to have the blocking and tackling, right? One of the challenges that we have within the OT community is that we want to move fast with really cool things, but we don't have good asset inventories. We don't know what control systems we have. We haven't effectively prioritized all those control systems. We haven't, in many cases, effectively understood what our task critical assets are. Okay, so I think fundamentally you need to know what you have, where it sits in the priority. Resources are always constrained. You can't pay to secure everything the same way, so you know what your most urgent things are. Kind of it goes back to some of your cyber hygiene and your cybersecurity program. Okay, some of the keys to success that we've identified. I did a survey on my team. I got a whole list. Some of these are pretty fundamental. I try not to be overly quantitative here, but identifying key systems, set realistic scope and timeline. Part of this is people, processes, and technology in your organization. Nothing stops zero trust or zero trust for OT without some sort of collaboration and buy-in. Okay, we have seen this. It doesn't work if you have a great idea and you don't get to implement that idea because there isn't buy-in or collaboration with people. Scale gradually across the organization. leverage lessons learned from work already done to date. Might sound very simple, but sometimes that's the key to getting into the network to try something new. Related to that one is also leveraging existing technologies. Quick story, the Zero Trust pilot we're doing now, we're leveraging some of the tools that are already deployed. So try your best not to start from scratch. More technically, network macro and micro segmentation early on. You need to have effective monitoring tools where you can see alerts and see your network traffic. If you do not have that, you won't move forward with doing Zero Trust on your networks. Remote access early with multi-factor identification is key as well. Other things I have here, take credit for the target level activities that you're probably already hitting. Get asset owners and operators involved early in the conversation. Again, it goes back to the collaboration piece. I didn't really want to spend a lot of time talking about that, but it keeps coming up. Make use of frameworks such as cyber-informed engineering and secure by design where you can. We'll get to TTPs in a second. Watch out for some of the pitfalls. Don't focus on perfection. Okay, perform proper due diligence. Just had an opportunity to talk to a senior leader. Had 30 seconds with her on the way out and said, everything we're doing so far in Zero Trust for OT, we test in our lab first. Okay, we want to get to a point where we can deploy things quicker. I'm looking at the guys who are doing this on the ground, but we have 2 lab environments that have 40 to 50 vendors, 200 plus endpoints. This isn't a sales thing here. This is a fact that I can look at my government leader in the eye and say, we're going to take however much time and we're going to upload the solution first and show it to you, what it does, then we're going to go downrange. So we have found that that minimizes risk. Depending on the organization's appetite for risk, test things first in the lab. Avoid treating ZT like a single product. It's not a product purchase. I'm biased, but if you just think that's going to show up in a box with 2 or 3 technologies, you're going to install it, you're going to have more headache than you're going to have solution. Don't overlook OT practices. I just want you to take this one away. If you're doing decent OT cybersecurity now, you're already making important steps towards implementing Zero Trust. Furthermore, on TTPs, prioritization of critical systems, continuous monitoring and verification. Security assessment up front is key. Okay? I can't tell you enough how much time we're wasting on long, burdensome, slow assessments. Quicker assessments up front to identify urgent vulnerabilities, but minimize risk of deployment. Establish metrics for success early. Know what right looks like. Is that just about Zero Trust activities hit? Or is it about how many alerts you get faster? Is it about how it impacts your incident response plan? Focus on identity and device verification and create a shared responsibility model, incentives. Last thing I'll say on that is, practically speaking, had a great maritime event that focused specifically on Zero Trust for maritime. A key stakeholder from the government stood up at the end and said, we need to think about how we incentivize our organizations to do this and realize that mission effectiveness, Zero Trust for OT implementation, how it impacts mission effectiveness will lead to something, whether it's more resources, whether it's acknowledgement, but we need to incentivize progress and make it worthwhile. Okay, sometimes just compliance with guidelines and policies, unless they're enforced, isn't enough. So these are some of the things that we've come up with, and we're still developing more. I encourage everyone to get involved in that conversation. You know, I tell you, 50-50. 50% of this presentation was from industry partners, 50% were from government engagements that probably many of you have been part of. OSD, AAS, DoD, PFMO, OSD Mission Assurance, Department of the Air Force, our cyber, having a conversation. I'm going to leave you, my personal point here is that this is an evolution. It's not as hard as we think. We are making substantial progress on securing OT networks. We need to move faster, and we need to encourage our asset owners to try things. And if things work, scale them. Our adversaries are trying things, and if they work, they're scaling them. So we need to be doing the same thing. I have time for 2 more questions probably, so I can stay on track. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I apologize for asking a second question and taking someone else's opportunity. So, when you look at the system model and the DoD model, is there any concern from an OT perspective about interoperability, or does that end up being a feature from the cybersecurity perspective?
Personal opinion, I'm seeing and doing the DoD model more than the system model. I think it's a feature, but we have seen some post zero trust deployment lessons learned of an unanticipated consequences of not having enough interoperability. Sort of an answer. I think if it's done right, it's a feature. I don't think we pay enough attention to the model when we do it. And here's part of the problem. We implement zero trust technology, we pull alerts, we see that it's working, we think it's something different, and then 6 months later, the sustainability of that solution doesn't fit with something else. We need to do this update. We need to do this investigation. We're switching out this software and this hardware, and all of a sudden things don't. So we need to do a better job revisiting the model, sir, when we're actually deploying zero trust solutions. Yeah. Sir.
Maybe this is a broader answer than the question is going to worry you. As industry partners, as manufacturers that are making products to go into command and control and the type of applications you described, is there 1 or 2 bullet points that we should be very conscientious to when we're designing, building, providing our products? A lot of what you're talking about is policy and what you're actually doing strategy at the command level. But what can we do as industry to be able to support your efforts?
Yeah, okay. That's the question I like the most, right? I mean, I like all these questions, but number one, tell me if this is a test. Are we testing something or are you ready to deploy it? Okay? If I'm a technology vendor and I'm coming to an asset owner and I'm going to help you do zero trust for OT, I want you to show me that this solution works and how it works. I mean, people might take that for granted. I'm looking at all kinds of people and different vendor partners. But I'll tell you what, fighting this every day in a good way, awesome partners out there. Bring your great slideshow. Let me see the architecture, come into the lab, install it, and show me that you're doing it. So it's got to work. And the second thing is, what other technologies are you interoperable with? Can you operate in the cloud or on-prem? Do you operate in the cloud solution? Because I'll tell you, related to that, again, opinion here, zero trust for OT implementation. Don't come talk to me if you're not able to implement in an environment where the AFCEA calling system, network enclave. Don't talk to me if you're going to support the Space Force without being able to interface with Elixir or Gabriel Nimbus for the Army. Because it doesn't do any good if you can't work with the mission systems that are already being deployed by the service. Now, we can tiptoe into it, okay? But I think those 2 things. Is your solution a test mode solution, or are you able to deploy this? And you need to be able to show me how you can deploy it on my network, and it works, and it's interoperable with the other solutions I'm already using. So that's my opinion. Other operators' thoughts, answers to that question? Okay. We're a little over. Really enjoyed the feedback from you guys. Happy to talk further and stay connected. Thanks, everybody, for your time.